Hello, Debbie here, and welcome to the start of Stamptember. If you're new around here and don't know what on earth I'm talking about, then you can check out more about Stamptember on my blog, and I'll leave a link to the post in the description below. For those of you that have been here for a while, you will know that in September, or otherwise known as Stamptember, there is a huge celebration held over at Simon Says Stamp. There's a massive new release from Simon today, and then on a daily basis for the whole month there will be limited edition new releases from stamp producers working with Simon to bring you a month's worth of fabulous inspiration. There are many parties and surprises along the way, and as best I can I will keep you up to date over on my blog on a daily basis. So keep an eye out over there to keep informed of all the Stamptember fun games and new products. Right, on to this card. When I was looking at the new Stamptember release from Simon Says Stamp, these are the stamps, dies, stencils and such which are exclusive to Simon. I was stopped in my tracks by this gorgeous etched tall leaf spray. So elegant and simple, and I knew immediately I wanted to cut it from an ivory card to showcase its beauty. It cut like a dream, and you can see all the texture that etching on the leaves gives. I had the scrap piece of watercolour card on which I'd been playing with a mossy green gradient, and the leaf die and this scrap piece of card were lovely together, apart from my scrap piece of card wasn't big enough. So I cut a piece of Fabriano Artistico extra white cold pressed watercolour card to the size of a slimline card. This is to fit on the larger full-size slimline card, not the mini size, and taped it to a board to prevent it warping. I mixed a mossy green grey colour on my palette. I can't tell you exactly what was in it. There was a little of this, a little of that, until I got the colour I wanted. I then brought in a large paintbrush loaded with paint and went straight onto the dry surface, moving the paint around with a brush. I then lightly rinsed some of the paint away in my water jar before swooshing the brush around again. I repeated a few times until I had a loose wet gradient filling the panel. I added a touch of Daniel Smith Perylene Green to one side and a little Daniel Smith Sepia to the top corner, and that's while the paint is still wet and the colours will blend together. If I listened to my own advice, I would have left this to dry on its own, but instead I kept lightly messing with the puddles of paint until I had a lovely gradient of mossy grey green filled with subtle texture and interest. I finished off the drying process with a heat tool. As I mentioned, this panel of card was cut to fit a slimline card. I did trim the panel slightly to ensure it fit nicely on the card base I'd cut and scored from Neenah Desert Storm card to fit into the slimline ivory envelope. Things were coming together nicely, but I still had a couple of touches to bring in. I added foam squares to all the leaves. The advantage of these foam squares is that they fit the majority of the leaves really well, and it was only the top few leaves which were smaller that I needed to cut the squares in half to fit. There were a number of other products in the new release which had a slightly vintage journaling sketchbook style, which is so on trend, and I love to see this style making its way into card making more. For this card I took the lovely greeting from the Document It set and stamped it in clear embossing ink on vellum, which I treated with an anti-static powder tool and then sprinkled with white embossing powder before heat setting. I trimmed the vellum with a craft knife, metal-edged gridded clear ruler and a self-healing cutting mat, using the lines of the cutting mat to ensure I cut the vellum straight. I took the strip and tore the right edge. However, before I added the vellum to the card, I needed to adhere the leaf in place. I took a few of the foam square backers off at a time and, working from the base of the stem, adhered to the watercolour panel. This way I had full control on where the frond was placed, and also because of the delicate stem you can slightly bend the die cut as you add it to the card. I then wrapped the vellum around the panel and secured on the back. As you can see, I had decided that somewhere on the card I wanted to add twine. I think twine adds that natural element which really suits this card. I debated adding a twirl of twine behind the vellum, but wanted to keep the wording of the sentiment clear to read, and so I decided a simple wrapping of the twine around the vellum edge and tied in a knot would add that texture and natural look I was after. I added teeny tiny pieces of foam tape hidden behind the white heat embossed sentiment to then adhere the vellum in place over the leaf die. I then added strips of foam tape across the back of the panel and adhered to the card base. Paired with the matching ivory envelope, and everything was looking lovely. However, I did want to add a few simple embellishments in the form of sequins and pearls from Little Things by Lucy's Cards. For those of you that have been following along for a while now, have you noticed that I didn't use any splatter on this card? I can't remember when I didn't add a touch of splatter. However, I didn't want to cover up that lovely watercolour in the background. Just look at that granulation and shifting of shades, it's just beautiful. And of course, paired with the fabulous Etched Tool leaf spray die cut and the lovely white heat embossed sentiment on vellum. Oh, and talking of following along, please hit the subscribe button here on YouTube, but also pop on over to my blog because that will be my base for sharing all the Stamptember fun, and I'm busy as a bee making lots of things to share with you. Okay, that's me for today. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.